Hey out there, this is June 27th, 2015, here in Northern California. Um, Today I wanted to talk about the perils of tolerating a quasi-governmental entity and any quasi-governmental entities. And the reason is because it is akin to fascism. Whenever you've got private interests, whether it be individual interests or corporate interests, involved in the government, basically in the workings of the government, the machinations of the government, you've got a problem because you begin to get special interest groups, and their interests tend to supersede the interests of the collective, and the collective being the will of the people. And it's much like fascism for that reason, that it no longer is a government by the people and for the people. It's a government by the corporations, by the private interests, for the corporations and for the private interests. So I also wanted to get into the week in review. And it's been a really busy week in the news between ISIS shootings and beheadings and the ramming through of the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. And we've got federally sanctioned gay marriages. What else? Oh, there's been a few other things, but mainly I wanted to touch on the things that really affect all of us. And these are always economically related. It's very important to understand that we have a small group of elitists at the very top of the pyramid, the top of the food chain, the dog pile. And these are the ones that create the policies that we all have to live under. And they're very disconnected from reality. They really don't give a crap about you and your kids or me and my kids. What they care about is just staying on top of this dog pile. And they're willing to use any means necessary. Again, this is a murderous gaggle of merciless thugs. And lying, cheating, stealing are nothing to these people. Because remember, they're willing to do anything to get their way. And this is why they've remained on top for so long, because they're willing to do the things that ordinary people that have that value conscience, that value honor and integrity, are not willing to lower themselves to do. And this explains why they remain on the top today. So as far as sitting here and trying to convince anybody that there's some kind of a political solution, a magic potion, and somebody's going to have an epiphany where we got aha. There's not going to be an aha moment other than what's already happened in the past, what's been predicted, for example, in Scripture, how the end game is supposed to really play out. This time and hour was predicted thousands of years ago, that there would be this period in human history when we would revert to immorality and decadence. And it would be, as Jesus described, like in the days of Noah, the breakdown of society. And it was every man to himself, and anything goes. As long as it benefits you, you can't worry about the other guy. So, just do it. It feels good, do it. So we've got that that's the rule of the day, and it tramples on the welfare of the public at large. The common welfare, the collective welfare. And it does this in a myriad of different ways. But primarily, it robs not only this current generation, but it's robbing future generations too of their wealth. And the way it does this is by creating this wealth disparity. And this is a matter of record that we in America and around the world, they've been experiencing a similar thing where you've got this perpetual wealth disparity, this growing wealth disparity. You've got this perpetual growing poverty out there. And, you know, perpetual hopelessness. And for those that are the status quo, you know, they've been riding high on this wave of tyranny. It's been working very well for them because they are insiders, essentially. That they are minions overall of the system. Just by going along to get along, they are complicit in this system. And their interests and the interests of the general public are at odds with each other. So anytime you try to shake up the status quo, which might be as simple as solving problems, that is a real shake-up to the status quo. So if you take a problem like a growing wealth disparity and say, well, let's figure out how we're going to change this. How can we stop wealth disparity in its tracks and reverse this course? So toward a more egalitarian, a more equalitarian state of affairs. Well, you're really stepping on toes because it's not that there's not a lot of solutions to poverty, for example. It's that it really flies in the face of the status quo because by ending poverty, you are inevitably, you are lessening the clout of the status quo establishmentarians. And I don't mean this because you're taking from them. You know, unlike socialism, where socialism is generally thought, there's a lot of well-meaning socialists out there that have an innocent notion of what it means. They think, well, what's wrong with a little, you know, Robin Hood economics and politics where you're taking from the haves and giving to the have-nots? But this invariably creates animosity from the haves. So the way to circumvent that is merely by allowing the have-nots to be haves. And the way to do that, of course, is through things like sound economic policies, sound currency, fairness in the economic structure. A true capitalist, supply and demand-based free market economy would create a condition where you would have a rising tide of prosperity across the board. Nobody left out of the loop. You see, we're constantly trained and indoctrinated to believe that there has to be this huge swath of the population that's left out of the loop. And you shouldn't ought to worry about that because these are stupid people. These are people that didn't go out and get an education. These are people that weren't born into wealth. These are just people that made bad decisions. These are people that are unmotivated. They're not ambitious. And these people are deserving to be trampled under the hooves of those that were born into wealth or those that made the right choices in life, whatever the case may be. But the fact is that the disenfranchised out there are being trampled under the hooves of the franchised because this is the way the system has been structured. This is the way we've been steered. When you think that the idea in life is just to go out and get a great education and make a lot of money, to become part of that private insider club, just consider who created these higher learning entities out there. Just consider who is creating these curriculums and the lack of curriculum and why it is structured the way it is. And mainly it's structured the way it is, it's because this same group I talked about at the very top of this pyramid has structured it like this intentionally. They want it to be a private group. They want a huge swath of desperate people. They need this to remain relevant. They need societal chaos. They need societal discontent. They need societal intimidation and fear. They need widespread poverty so that they have high crime rates, so that they can impose debt, so that they can engage in dubious warfare. All these things are critical to the powers that be staying in control at the top of this pyramid. And without great poverty, without great wealth disparity, they won't be able to get away with these things. You'll start seeing crime dry up. You'll see a much safer, kinder, gentler society. You'll start seeing dubious warfare disappear, because people that are well off are not interested in getting involved in a war that they're very uncertain about. Men will gladly go off to war for a just cause, believe me. It's always been the case, always through history. And the debt. Nobody's going in debt. The well-off don't go in debt for any reason. So you see, in order for these people to stay in control, they need this great societal chaos. And without it, they are rendered irrelevant. We don't need them anymore, in other words. And this is their worst nightmare. This is their greatest fear, that someday there would be societal peace and harmony and justice and equity. So understand that these people's interest is at odds with the interest of the upright. In a nutshell, we're just talking about the upright. Those out there that hunger and thirst for things like righteousness, that value things like a pure heart and a noble conscience and integrity and honor. So we're up against a real behemoth in dealing with these people. And when they start involving the general public, they welcome in, like, for example, let's take the welfare state. Let's understand the Cloward and Piven strategy. Let's understand it's by intent. It's by deliberation that we have this ever-growing poverty. And the reason behind it is this whole idea that, well, we've got to create these poor people. We've got to maintain the poverty and proliferate the poverty because we're destroying the earth. So the idea is if we make people really, really poor, they can't afford to have a large carbon footprint. So this is the whole idea. They want to, and they openly speak about depopulation practices. They want to do this thing. So it's all part and parcel. It's all tied together. It's interconnected. The whole thing with promoting a gay agenda, well, you can see how this would help to diminish the population. If enough people go gay, well, yeah, there's going to be a reduction in the population. So they add these estrogen-mimicking chemicals to our foodstuffs and packaging materials and stuff. And you see this happening. Men are starting to become more and more effeminate. The women are starting to become more and more masculinized. And so there's this schism breaks down. So the men start thinking, hey, you know what, maybe I will, decide to be gay, because a lot of men do, quite frankly, decide maybe that's the direction they want to swing. And there's a lot of practical reasons. They say, well, it's easier to communicate with men. They see things more the way I do. And there's a passage from Scripture about men loving men. And this is a very good thing, that God would encourage men to love men. But it's a very pure love. It's a good love. It's a noble love. And to me, the idea of getting into a sexual relationship with a man just it taints the whole thing. And it's nothing I want to be involved in as a heterosexual man. But you see, the system is steering us in a myriad of ways toward this depopulation agenda. And the climate is tied into that, because with this climate fear-mongering, as if this is man's place to get involved in the climate. This is Mother Nature's place. This is God's place. The same with population. This is nothing we should have to worry ourselves about, because we're talking about a God that put these wheels into motion, that created us, that said, go forth, be fruitful, and populate the earth, multiply. So when the earth is multiplied, when we have populated the earth to God's satisfaction, He simply pulls the fertility plug and we can't produce any more. He could do it slowly, however he wants to. It's on his schedule. We need not concern ourselves with these things. They're big things, and they're out of our control. We should not ought to get involved